Today, we are diving deep into a really fascinating and honestly super personal spiritual text from the 17th century. We're going to explore a journey that starts from a place of deep suffering and aims for, well, nothing less than perfection. And we'll see it all through the eyes of one person's incredible divine revelations. So the author doesn't start with some grand explanation. Nope, it begins with a plea. And right away, this one sentence just sets the whole stage. It's a cry from someone who's just exhausted by the world, someone looking for a kind of inner sanctuary. This feeling, this being utterly worn out, it's the launchpad for everything that comes next. Okay, so to really get our heads around this journey, we're going to follow 5 key stages. We'll kick things off with that initial plea, then explore the pretty surprising role of pain. After that, we'll dissect this unique metaphor for the soul, look at the gap between divine guidance and, human reality, and finally uncover the actual path to perfection laid out in the text.
Great, let's start where the author does, in a state of pretty profound distress. And this isn't some abstract philosophical idea. It's born from a very real, very raw exhaustion with the outside world.
The author paints this picture of themselves lying down like a person just exhausted by extreme languor. And we're not just talking about being physically tired here. This is a deep soul-level weariness. It's caused by what they call the world's persecutions and outrages. And it's from this absolute low point that the real desire for spiritual peace and clarity starts to spark. Now, this whole experience leads to an idea in the text that's, well, it's pretty out there for us today. Instead of seeing suffering as something you should run from, the author has shown that it actually has this vital, purifying purpose. And here it is. This is the central paradox of the whole text. The author learns that the more intense the suffering, the more light the soul gets. This just flips everything we think about pain on its head. In this view, affliction isn't some kind of punishment. It's actually a powerful tool for enlightenment. And this quote just brilliantly nails the point. The author writes that these very trials are what touch the soul keenly, efficaciously, and intimately. So, far from breaking the soul down, they're the very thing that leads to serenity and a kind of inner brightness. It's a wild thought, right? All right, so how does this actually work? Well, the concept builds into this really fascinating visual metaphor that the author receives, and it explains how this whole purification process is supposed to happen. It's a fair question, isn't it? If suffering is what brings the light, then where does the darkness come from? Well, the text gives us a very specific and kind of unusual explanation through a divine revelation. It's like we get a lesson in spiritual anatomy. And what's so cool is that we can see the actual text where this is all laid out. The author says that by frequent revelations, they learned how the soul gets darkened. So let's break down this incredible metaphor they were given. What a piece of imagery. Okay, so try to picture this. The soul is like a person, kind of trapped in a tight spot. And below it, the body is described as a cooking vessel. The frailties of the body, all its imperfections and evils, create this dark steam that just rises up and surrounds the soul, totally obscuring its light. So the whole thing boils down to this 4-step process. You've got the soul, it's confined. You've got the body, which is a source of impurity. Its frailties create a darkening vapor. And then you have suffering. In this metaphor, suffering is like a beam of sunlight that just cuts right through that vapor, clearing the air and bringing what's called a marvelous clearness back to the soul. Understanding a metaphor like that is one thing, but actually living it, that's a whole other story. The next stage of this journey is just so deeply human. It's all about the struggle between getting this perfect wisdom and the narrator's own failure to live up to it. And this right here just perfectly captures that inner battle. On one side, you have the divine counsel, teaching patience, revealing these deep truths. And on the other side, the author's brutally honest admission, how seldom have I listened. There's this constant tug of war between the perfect ideal and the messy, imperfect reality, and it leads to shame and this real desire to do better. Okay, so after all these incredible revelations and the very real regret that follows, the text doesn't just leave the authors stuck in a state of shame. It actually lays out a very clear, actionable plan to bridge that gap. This is really the climax of the whole chapter. The journey from suffering to understanding all culminates in a set of instructions. The author is told that the great perfection of a soul comes down to performing 3 specific exercises. And here's the three-part plan. First, you got to let go of the pleasure you get from worldly attachments. Second, you have to shift your focus completely inward, occupying yourself with God and really guarding what you see and hear. And third, you turn that internal focus back outward, but this time in service, working for the salvation of your neighbor. So after all that, what can we pull from this? Well, this 17th century guide gives us a pretty radical idea that suffering isn't just random, but it can be a tool for clarity. It really emphasizes that self-awareness, recognizing the vapors from our own frailties, is the absolute first step. And in the end, it argues that real perfection means moving away from self-interest and towards a higher purpose in serving others. And that leaves us with a really challenging final thought, doesn't it? I mean, we live in a world that is constantly trying to get rid of discomfort and make everything easy. So what, if anything, can we learn from this historical perspective? A perspective that doesn't just accept hardship, but sees it as the very thing that can burn away the fog and maybe lead to a brighter, more serene life. Something to think about.